Welcome everyone to my channel. In today's video, we will discuss part 5 of the book, The Autobiography of Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, and kindly consider donating. The donation link is provided in the description below. To gain access to summaries of books, please check out our Ko-Fi channel link below and follow us for exclusive content. Let us begin. On December 5th, 1956, Mandela was woken up by a loud knock at his door. The police came in and arrested him for high treason. At the station, he found out that many other activists had also been arrested across the country. Even though he was sent to prison, he felt hopeful after reading in the newspapers that many people were upset and angry about the arrests. Later, Mandela appeared in court with 155 other activists who were all facing the same charges. Supporters packed the courtroom. During the reading of the charges, a gun suddenly went off, and the trial had to be postponed for a few days. When Mandela was granted bail, he noticed that black and colored people were charged less for bail than white people, which was an ironic situation. Even before the trial began, Mandela's marriage to Evelyn was already going through a rough patch. They experienced the heartbreaking loss of a daughter, and 6 years later, Evelyn gave birth to another girl, whom they named after the one they lost, following their cultural tradition. Over time, Evelyn became deeply involved in the Jehovah's Witness faith, but Mandela didn't agree with the religion's message of obedience and submission. Their differences grew, especially as Evelyn couldn't fully understand Mandela's dedication to the ANC and his political activism, which kept him constantly busy. The tension between them increased, and by the time Mandela was released from prison, Evelyn had left him and taken their children to live with her brother. Looking back, Mandela regretted some of his choices, especially how the breakdown of their marriage impacted their children. On January 9, 1957, Mandela's trial picked up again as the defense began presenting its arguments. Mandela felt thankful for his talented lawyers, who were able to challenge the government's claims that he and the others were trying to overthrow the state and bring in communism. The trial went on for a long time, and to pass the time, the accused would sometimes do crosswords or play Scrabble. The case dragged out for most of the year. Then, in a surprise move in September, the state dropped the charges against several people, including Lutuli and Tambo, but Mandela was not among them. Finally, 13 months after the trial had begun, the magistrate ruled that Mandela and the remaining accused would face trial for treason in the Supreme Court. One day while driving, Mandela noticed a stunning woman who caught his eye. To his surprise, just a couple of weeks later, she walked into his office with her brother. Her name was Nomzamo Winifred Madikizela, but she went by Winnie. Mandela was instantly drawn to her. Looking for an excuse to spend time with her, he invited her out to lunch and introduced her to Indian curry, which she had never tried before. Winnie began visiting him often, even joining him at political meetings and at the gym. The two fell in love and got married on June 14, 1958. Mandela was given a short 6-day break from his travel ban, so he could attend the wedding and visit Winnie's family. But there was no time for a honeymoon. Once the ban resumed, Mandela was quickly pulled back into his political work and ongoing trial. In 1958, a new election was held where only about 3 million white people were allowed to vote, while around 13 million African people still had no voting rights. The ANC tried to organize a strike to protest the election, but the plan didn't come together as hoped. In the end, the Nationalist Party ended up gaining even more votes than in the previous election. Afterward, some people started questioning whether the ANC should have taken a more aggressive approach. But Mandela wasn't convinced. He felt that if you had to force people to act, the support wasn't truly strong or meaningful. One of the Nationalist Party's most unpopular laws was the requirement for women to carry passbooks, which they called reference books. Even though the police had been arresting women who took part in protests, Winnie told Mandela she wanted to join one. He supported her decision, but also warned her about the risks, like possibly losing her job if she got arrested. A large group of women gathered at the Central Pass office to protest, and Mandela and Tambo's law firm stepped in to help defend those who were taken into custody. Winnie was among the women arrested, but she was released on bail. Despite everything, she stayed committed to the protest movement and refused to back down. Mandela's trial, along with the cases of 91 others, was set to begin in August 1958. Things weren't looking good for him, especially when the trial was moved from Johannesburg to Pretoria, which meant the defense team had to make the long commute every day. Before the trial officially began, Mandela's lawyers took some bold legal steps that paid off, but the final outcome of the case was still uncertain. Around the same time, in February 1958, Winnie gave birth to their daughter, Zenani, nicknamed Zenny. Still in her mid-20s, Winnie found it tough at first to balance being a wife and a new mother, but she gradually adapted to her new life and responsibilities. A new political group called the Pan-Africanist Conference, PAC, emerged, promoting a strictly African-focused approach that clashed with the ANC's belief in a multiracial struggle. Although there was clear rivalry between the two movements, Mandela had respect for PAC leader Robert Sobukwe and still had connections with several members, since many of them had once been part of the ANC. Even though Mandela saw some of PAC's ideas as immature, he stayed curious about what they stood for and continued reading about their policies. Deep down, he believed that one day the two groups might come back together and work as one. In 1959, the government passed the Promotion of Bantu Self-Government Act, which divided people into 8 separate Bantustans based on their ethnic background. This was part of a larger policy known as Groot Apartheid, or Grand Apartheid, aimed at deeply enforcing racial separation. According to this plan, about 70% of the population was forced to live on just 13% of the country's land. As people were removed from their homes and communities, violence broke out, and the forced relocations caused widespread suffering and unrest. Nearly 3 years after Mandela was first arrested, the trial finally started in August 1959. But on October 11th, the proceedings were delayed again when the prosecutor suddenly died from a stroke. During the trial, the prosecution called witnesses who couldn't clearly prove that the ANC was controlled by communists. However, they did present an audio recording of a well-known activist, Robert Rishaw, that seemed to encourage violence, though Mandela believed the clip was taken out of context. Mandela, even though the judges were starting to understand the ANC's position better, but then everything took a sudden turn on March 21st, 1960. In December 1959, the ANC held its annual conference amid growing protests against the passed laws. The nationalist government was nervous because liberation movements were gaining ground in other African countries. The ANC planned a big anti-pass protest for March 30th, but the PAC scheduled theirs earlier for March 21st and invited the ANC to join them. Mandela saw this as a strategic move by the PAC rather than a true effort for unity, so the ANC chose not to participate. On March 21st, PAC leader Sobukwe turned himself into the police, but instead of getting a short sentence of 3 weeks, he was unexpectedly sentenced to 3 years. At a PAC protest in Sharpeville, police opened fire on the crowd, killing 69 African people, including women and children. Many were shot in the back as they tried to run away. The United Nations Security Council finally took notice and condemned the South African government. In response, Mandela, Luthuli, and others from the ANC organized a huge protest on March 28th. The protest was so massive that the government declared a state of emergency and put martial law in place. On March 30th, Mandela was once again woken by a knock at his door, which he immediately recognized as the police. They ransacked his home, searching for any evidence, and then took him to a nearby police station. The conditions there were terrible, with dirty surroundings and barely any food. Mandela was singled out by an officer who called him cheeky just because he was standing with his hands in his pockets. Later, Mandela was brought to a commander's office, where he found Robert Rishaw also being held. The atmosphere between Mandela and the commander grew tense, but then Mandela was told that he would have to go to Pretoria to continue his treason trial. Mandela was furious when he found out that Luthuli had been beaten while in jail. At the same time, one of Mandela's allies, who was also facing charges in the trial, managed to escape the country because the police mistook him for a bystander and told him to leave. Across South Africa, more than 2,000 people were being held without trial. Mandela stayed in prison as the trial continued. The state of emergency made it very hard for Mandela and the other accused to stay in contact with their lawyers. To cope, they came up with a plan to delay the trial as much as possible, hoping the state of emergency would eventually be lifted. Prison was tough, but Mandela sometimes found comfort and friendship with the other prisoners, and occasionally Winnie was allowed to visit him. In court, they kept stalling by calling each other as witnesses until finally, the state of emergency ended and their lawyers were allowed back. Mandela started giving his testimony on August 3rd. The government tried to portray him as a violent communist and argued that people who weren't educated shouldn't have the right to vote. Mandela responded by saying there are many kinds of education and that even someone who can't read or write can have knowledge that school can't teach. After Mandela finished, the defense's final speaker, Professor Matthews, made a powerful case that the accused were involved in a peaceful fight for freedom. In September, once the state of emergency ended, Mandela and the rest of the ANC held secret meetings to figure out their next steps. Mandela was extremely busy with his work and didn't get to spend much time with his family. During this time, Winnie gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Zinziswa, or Zinzi for short, a name shared with the daughter of a well-known Xhosa poet. Mandela's trial continued to drag on. Just 2 days before the trial was paused, his travel ban was lifted. Thinking the police probably wouldn't be paying close attention, he decided to drive 300 miles to Pietermaritzburg for a meeting. Afterward, he planned to return to Pretoria for the trial's verdict. In his speech, Mandela called for people of all backgrounds, black, white, Indian, and colored, to come together in unity. Meanwhile, the nationalist government held a referendum that only white voters could take part in, and it resulted in South Africa becoming a republic. On March 29, 1961, the courtroom was packed as everyone awaited the verdict of the treason trial. The judge announced that the prosecution had not proven the ANC was a communist group, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Mandela was set free, but he understood that this decision probably only made the government more determined to go after him. Still, he praised the judges for putting aside their biases and judging the case fairly. Conclusion of Part 5. From the mid-1950s through the early 1960s, Mandela's life was marked by intense struggle and sacrifice as he fought against apartheid in South Africa. Despite facing constant arrests, trials, and harsh prison conditions, Mandela remained committed to his cause and his belief in justice. His personal life faced challenges too. His first marriage ended amid the pressures of activism, but he found new love and family with Winnie. Throughout this period, Mandela navigated complex political landscapes, including rival groups like the PAC and harsh government policies that oppressed millions. The trials dragged on for years, with the state trying to paint Mandela and the ANC as violent communists. But Mandela consistently defended their peaceful fight for freedom. Even after his release from the treason trial, Mandela knew the road ahead would be tough. Yet he never lost hope for unity among South Africans of all backgrounds. His courage and resilience during these years laid the foundation for the broader struggle that would eventually lead to a free and democratic South Africa. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and consider supporting the channel through the donation link in the description. Don't forget to visit our Ko-Fi channel for exclusive book summaries.